Very few people know that, but the Japanese have a ton of investments in Africa, Southeast Asia, and other places. So it was a natural partnership because they have kind of a mentality of just go ahead and buy and build for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, I'm curious, after your time in Japan, you guys started focusing on emerging markets. What were the initial goals of these trips? And could you share any unexpected outcomes or lessons that later influenced strategic decisions?
Well, the goal was always emerging markets. I mean, my TED talk was from 2014, which predates the Cardano project. And if you look at some of my early Ethereum work, I was talking about emerging markets as well. And there was a great symbiosis there because Japan cares a lot about emerging markets, ironically. Very few people know that, but the Japanese have a ton of investments in Africa, Southeast Asia, and other places. So it was a natural partnership because they have kind of a mentality of just go ahead and buy and build for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. Like if you look at the Shinkansen, which is like the bullet train, you'll meet people whose grandfathers worked on it, fathers work on it, and the kids are now working there. So you go to a country and you're like, oh, it'll take 50 years to build this. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're 2,000 years old. 50 years is really not that much time. So, we always wanted to do something in Southeast Asia and in Africa. The Emergo guys, because one of the guys who helped found them was based in Cambodia and Vietnam, had a really nice lock on that market. And they said, let us take Southeast like Indonesia and Thailand and Vietnam and these things. And I said, that's great. I'll go to Africa and we'll set that up. And Dan, he had a lot of experience operating in kind of the former Soviet republics, Eastern Europe. And we sent him out to Georgia, like in one trip. Literally, I have a meeting with the prime minister of the country. It's like a state visit. You got to tell him about Georgia. That was just nuts.
Yeah, no, Georgia was it was an interesting trip. So it all started with, so back then, we launched, we started building up a community, it was known, we were known, there weren't, it wasn't just like scrape the internet. Once in a while, somebody talks about us. Oh, I don't know about these guys. We had a community. And so people started reaching out to us, and Charles, I mean, he was, he was traveling like 340 days out of the year.
Yeah.
And he's always got stuff going on. So he doesn't really have time to follow up on a lot of these opportunities that came in. And so that became my job. After we launched, I switched over to business development. And so I started following up on everything that would come into Charles's mailbox and just really pursuing them, seeing what makes sense. And there was one opportunity where somebody contacted us from Georgia and said that, hey guys, this is, we have a lot of different opportunities here and we love Cardano. And so I said, hey, Georgia, I know Georgia. I'm Ukrainian, so of course I know Georgia, and I know, all the great things about Georgia. So at that point, I was actually working with during the early CF days. I was in Zurich. I was in Zurich for about a month, and before that, Charles and I were in Tokyo. And I come to Charles and I say, I remember we were in that really weird tiki lounge at the hotel in Tokyo. Yeah, this hotel in Tokyo was built by this really famous Japanese industrialist, and it has the most weirdest like tiki lounge in the middle of it. And so
I think we had drinks there with like Mike Parsons or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I forgot about that tiki lounge too. There's, Japan is like the ultimate place to go for the bar, the custom bar with some sort of theme. Like, what's that block in Osaka that's got all the tiny bars inside of it? It's
Minami Dotonbori. It's Dotonbori.
Yeah, Dotonbori. And I remember I would go there, like, go to one. It's like there's a guy who'll hypnotize you, and then you go to another one, and they'll like fat women will slap you, and then the one you have like a naked Japanese guy on a table, and he's beating the person, and he's like, "Come back half hour." We're like, "Whoa, I don't know, man." You shut the door and you just walk off. Japan has that. And then you go to another just totally normal bar, and it's all in just one block in one particular area. But that's where all the business is done. You go there, it's just like, what is going on here? And then you talk to some guy, he's like, oh yeah, I used to be the CEO of Sony. Like, what the fuck? it's like, okay. But what's nice about it is you meet some lifelong friends, and all the people we met from back then, we still hang out with. Like, I'm going to Japan in, is it September for,
September,
for token 2049, and it's all the old G's, and you just walk in, you haven't seen them in 10 years, and it's just like you haven't talked in a day. They say, "Oh, how's the family? How's everything?" It's the same conversation.
Yeah. No, it's everything everything has a really long arc out here in Japan. It's not like a quick thing. It's a long arc. Takes a while for the culture to accept what you're doing. There are obviously a lot of progressive minds out here, but the culture is very conservative. So you have to really understand that when you work in Japan, and you really have to accommodate that with your business. But then you can't get stuck. So it's kind of like, that middle. So going back to Georgia, so we had this meeting. I go to Charles. I say, "Hey, Charles, there's an opportunity in Georgia. Should I check it out?" He says, "Yeah, Dan, that's your job. Go do it." So I go down there. I spend about a week there. And literally, like, everybody's really looking to jump in, because one of the reasons why I love working in emerging economies, and I'm sure Charles it feels the same way, is there is always, and unless it's some sort of like, dictatorship that is just crushes this kind of thing, there's always this urge to leapfrog, and there's always this opportunity to make impact and to propagate things a lot better than you would in a developed economy. There's a lot more impact there. There's a lot more impact to be had. And so these economies are hungry. A lot of times they're hungry because they need a new way to progress, because the old way is just too slow and costs too much. And so that's why Georgia was so interesting, because it's Europe. It's a very well-developed country, but there's still so much opportunity for growth there. And so I went there. I was able to meet with the Ministry of Education, the central bank, and eventually, we went to see the Prime Minister. The next time, Charles came out with me. We kind of did the whole round. We signed with the Ministry of Education. We went to meet the Prime Minister. And it's Cardano is still there. I mean, the CF did the wine traceability project there. Great jurisdiction. I mean, I personally am looking forward to one day bringing Georgian wine on Palmyra.
I still have some of that wine on my shelf. It's been quite a bit since you guys were in Japan and then traveling to emerging markets. What has changed since that original vision that you had, even, since Ethereum? Is there anything that you find particularly exciting at the moment when it comes to emerging markets? And what are your thoughts on how Daniel is continuing this early mission and expanding this vision with Palmyra?
Yeah, so I had to learn the hard way how to do business in emerging markets. First, every country is a snowflake. It's different, and it has a culture and a way and a process. And you have to kind of learn the secret handshakes to be able to unlock that jurisdiction. When you talk about Georgia, it's like all these guys that are older dudes that speak Russian, and you just get shit-faced drunk with them and have that conversation. Yeah. It's how the Soviets did business, man. So that's how you do it. Japan, it's a whole radically different thing. You're still getting shit-faced drunk, but it's in a different context. But anyway, when we look to Africa, there it's fast-moving consumer goods, microfinance, and telecommunications are usually your three huge drivers. And then there's this bigger thing, commodities and ag tech. And those are the big things that if you touch it, you'll probably get yourself killed or run into some problems, because that's where China plays and nation states play in these things. That's the bread and butter of all that stuff. So it's the same when you look at, Sri Lanka or India or other places. Those are also huge markets for fast moving consumer goods, telecommunications, and for, commodities and other such things. And, right now we're touching very heavily the fintech side, in particular microcredit. We have products with Real FICO. That's John O'Connor, who actually joined the company around the same time Dan did. And there we found ways to get the NPL down from 40% to 2%. So that's the non-performing loan rates. And the interest rates down from like 85% to around 15 or less. Well, that pairs beautifully if you also have commodities with it. We don't do the commodities at IO. So it's really exciting to see things like Zengate come around, because how you get these things done is you create an ecosystem of partnerships. And some are on the identity and compliance side, and some are figuring out how do you do your credit scoring. Some of them involve the banking partners or the regulated entities, because you have a network of networks of people with licenses. And then some of them are, how do you do the agricultural side and the commodities side? And so as we open up Kenya, for example, I would love to see how we can drop in what they're doing in there, and it will fit very naturally because it can add as collateral for loans, or they create very natural marketplaces. You can create micro futures markets, these types of things, especially in the long tail.
Yeah, and we're actually we're already in Kenya. We're actually working with the Kenyan tea producers. One of our advisors, Joyce Mina, she's a very well-known Kenyan tea expert. She's in the UK, but she's originally from Kenya, and so she actually opened up that market for us. And I mean, that market is ripe for change. And they originally approached us at the World Tea Expo last year. There's quite a bit of innovation to be had there. But again, it's, as Charles said, you have to kind of tread carefully, because there's already processes in place there, and you don't want to, you don't want to upset too many people, so that there's not roadblocks. You have to speak to them and make them understand that this is in your favor. You can expand what you're doing. You can expand on the opportunity if you just embrace this particular way of doing. So yeah, it's also cultural. A lot of times, and we had this conversation, Charles, right? I mean, you really have to come in there and you really have to establish at least a local presence,
right,
for the people to really embrace what you're doing, because they have to see that their own people are embracing it. It's not just a bunch of dudes from somewhere out west that came in there and started telling them, oh, hey guys, listen to us. We got a better way of doing things for you. No. You have to come in, you have to respect the culture, you have to respect the movement, and you have to show them that, look, we're here to stay. Because a lot of these countries, what they're actually afraid of is people coming in, taking stuff from them and leaving, because that happened so many times in the past. What you have to come in, show them that you're staying, and stay and follow through. Because also, if you don't follow through, that is also going to be a big issue, because they're going to say, these guys are full of crap. These guys didn't follow through. These guys didn't build what they were going to build. And that's it. It's going to fall apart. And then it's going to carry over to other places. So you have to be very careful in these situations.
Yeah, and how do you spread the wealth around? If nobody likes a predatory system where there's a top-down structure, you build something, the marketplace defines the dynamics, and it screws all the producers and consumers. And that's oftentimes what happens in long-tail commodity exchanges. And it's refreshing that somebody's approaching it from a fundamentally different viewpoint. And, it's a natural partnership in that we need the credit data. Because if you're doing microfinance and you're saying, well, I need to do a 360 assessment of whether this person's creditworthy or not, I have to look at many different factors, and I don't have a FICO credit score or something like that. I don't have a standard agency to come in and do that. So that meaningful engagement is what really gives you that. And commodity production is typically where people make their money in a developing economy, whether it be agricultural goods or mining goods or what have you. And it's usually very small scale. And unfortunately, that doesn't touch traditional markets. It goes through a series of aggregators and it eventually gets to a national exchange. But all that small data is lost as it gets aggregated, whether it be to the washing station with the coffee beans or what have you.